A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Meaning of Life. How does the unconscious affect our conscious life? Will we get answers to this from neuroscientist Josua Kohberg in a moment? Stay tuned. Hello Josua, welcome. Hello Rolf. Does the unconscious have a stronger effect on us than the conscious? I would put it even more dramatically. Everything we have, so all results, all abilities, everything we implement day after day are results of our unconscious level. Even if we believe that we are constantly making conscious decisions, at this point I would like to question how much is really deliberately decided. And that means that our conscious life is fed from the unconscious, or all the motivations come from the unconscious. Exactly. So we have an extremely slow processing speed at the level of consciousness. We've a lot of areas that immediately make us overwhelmed, which cause that we also get stressed, for example. And the unconscious levels, which are broken down very widely, we have a pre-conscious right down to the really complete subconscious, they actually ensure the results. So if I meet someone today who's 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, their entire character image is basically completed, formed at the unconscious levels. And this person also wants to make changes, also thinks about how they can do that if they're dissatisfied with something, but they'll always experience things that happen by themselves. And now, of course, it may be that I'm in exactly the right position. I'll take an example. I have a professional musician whose entire structure in these unconscious areas is designed for creativity, for music, for the language of music. Then this person will have great success. And then I might have a similarly structured person on the other side whose parents recommended that they become a tax officer when they were young, so that they have a secure income. And they'll always work against their structure because they'll not enjoy it. They will not like going to work. They'll find this stressful and they may then do it in their free time, building musical instruments or even learning to play them, just to give you some ideas. And these unconscious levels, they always work at full speed for us, but we have to let them work for us. Yeah, that would mean that I have to be able to read my unconscious, to be able to decipher it, or even, firstly, I have to pay attention to it. How do I do that? Yeah, that's where it starts. You hit the nail on the head. First of all, we need to pay attention to this area of our lives. If we don't know that it is, well, that's like if a person doesn't know what sporting skills they have. They won't use them. If they don't know what musical skills they have, then they won't use them. And the moment I get a feeling for something, I start to consciously think about it again. How nice would it be to do sports, make music, do programming, whatever. It doesn't really matter what it's about. And I can turn to this area of my life in a very simple way, because access to all these unconscious levels of our character, this access is provided by our voice. Very, very interesting. Our voice, that's interesting. I was just thinking about silence and meditation, which may also be a way, depending on what you are cultivating. But how does access via the voice take place? Can you explain that to us in more detail? Gladly. It's a very, very old system. The first written records I can cite, it's probably much older, are over 3,000 years old from the Vedas. These are the scriptures in a certain area in India. And the Vedas describe it really, really interestingly. It can also be derived from Latin, by the way. I'll say something about that too. But the Vedas describe that a person's personality is recognizable by their voice. So that means that when we hear a person speaking, their personality structure, their character is present in the voice. And when I came across it for the first time in 2001, it was a fascinating experience for me because I didn't know that everyone can express themselves in such detail through sounds. And then, of course, I started to deal with the topic. My wife and I have been researching it very intensively for 17 years. And the fascinating thing is, if you now take our language, because the Indian culture, the Indian music is something completely different. It may seem strange to a classical European. I was also often in India where I was able to have very exciting experiences. But if I explain it with our root, and that's Latin for us, and I take the word personality, then I get to the stem of the word, which is personare. And personare is the Latin term for personality, but it also means to sound through. That is, our personality resonates through our tone. And that in turn is an incredibly exciting connection that can also be traced back to us over several thousand years. That arouses a certain curiosity in me. How does information get into my unconscious at all? If I listen to someone, am I susceptible to certain voices? Or more accessible? Are there others I completely block? Because maybe it doesn't match my personality or doesn't resonate with me, to put it that way. What's happening through the voice? Well, we as humans create an expression. So I express myself now and it creates an impression on you or on the viewers. They listen now, you listen when I speak, and then an impression is made. And indeed, we can depict different vocal patterns, and some are very harmonious, some are disharmonious, some are moderately harmonious or moderately disharmonious, and in fact, we know that too. Each of us has already experienced it. I think I can also speak for the viewers that someone enters the room and they start to speak, or even the first visual impression, then they start talking and then we say, Nah, I don't connect with them. They're not on my wavelength. That would be such a topic, and that is a completely unconscious perception. I don't even know the person, but I still have such a judgment because I simply perceive that it doesn't fit. Or on the other hand, the person comes in and I immediately notice, great, well, we're on the same level. We also know such terms. I have a good feeling, and that actually can't be reproduced consciously. Why am I judging them like this? The two of us, for example, I just got to know you, and we are on the same level. So I had the impression we'll get along well with each other, but I can't explain it to you. I don't know you. I don't know what your history is. But still, it's a feeling that's there. Well, that takes place with or without a voice. When we talk to each other, it's one thing. The other is simply perceiving someone. That's another level. The visual, or even if you close your eyes, then you still feel the presence of the other person, and whether it is positive or not so positive. And that, I guess, takes place in the unconscious. That's it, yeah, exactly. Of course, there are also a lot of unconscious topics that come into play. I'll make a little funny example now. Let's assume when I was a child or teenager, there was Aunt Mitzi in my family, and I didn't like Aunt Mitzi. She had a certain voice, a certain tonality, maybe also a certain visual appearance. And now, 30 years later, a woman walks in the door. She looks similar to Aunt Mitzi, and she sounds like that too. Then I have all the programming that I myself have put on this voice towards the person. And she doesn't even know what's going on, because she's not Aunt Mitzi, but that's how I perceive her. Of course, this is a factor too that gives a very high level of complexity. My personal experience is, how does the voice affect me? How does the personality affect me? It's all connected. So we would say prejudices. But that really has its reason and its history. Exactly. What is the unconscious like? That's always a topic. For example, we briefly mentioned it in an earlier program. Hypnosis, putting someone under hypnosis. Do I get direct access to the unconscious? So, at the really deep unconscious level, I can only speak from a neuroscience perspective right now. There's a lot of mainstream statements in coaching that we say we can fully access the unconscious. In fact, as a neuroscientist, I would say no. For example, such processes as body temperature, respiratory rate, heartbeat. There are such topics. I actually saw it live in India, that people in a deep trance are able to change their heartbeat, their body temperature, things like that. So it is possible. But I'll say for an average person like me, as an example, it's not really possible. You'd have to undergo very, very conscious and unconscious training routines for years, decades. But there are levels that we call pre-conscious in neuroscience, for example, that one could access with classic coaching or something. But the really deep things, traumas and such, there are forms of therapy and so on, and all of that has its justification. I'm just saying very pragmatically, simply scientifically speaking, I find it very, very difficult to access these levels. Yeah, I guess that's a natural defense that we're building here. But actually, there is one thing that gets me there. That's the exciting thing. And without consciousness, for example, when we use sounds non-verbally, I'll do a simple example. Someone who has a piece of music that reminds them of a wonderful time in their life, they only have to hear the first bars of this piece of music and they have a completely different emotional concept. And a feeling is just, I'm sorry for being a bit profane again, but as a neuroscientist, it's just a chemical process. That means I have a biochemical process and suddenly I feel good about it, or I'm scared, but that was actually evoked via sounds. So no verbal coaching where my consciousness is switched on. That's why it's said so beautifully that music is the language of the soul. Yeah, that fits. There is also this sound therapy that is probably built on that. And I can only back that up with my own experience. When I hear certain pieces of music, memories are awakened that I didn't even know I had in my memory at all. I can even call up times and verbatim dialogue. But mostly only, actually just if I think about it in a positive sense. Negative experiences, traumas are, well, they're then suppressed again. And that's actually the interesting aspect for therapeutic applications, to get to the traumas. What possibilities do we have to access our unconscious? Let me elaborate on that a bit further, since that immediately leads us to the subject of manipulation. When I trust someone, I let them into my unconscious too. Can I consciously control this to let someone in? Yeah, so not from my perspective. I can't control it like that. But I also don't see any danger or anything in there because, in fact, nobody could enter these really unconscious levels deliberately unless they really manipulate it, so to speak, with a high repetition rate. So I don't want to judge that at all, and also not get into classic topics. But, for example, of course, the media can manipulate by presenting certain states as relative or not. I'll make a positive example. In the 70s, it was wanted, or should it be caused, that people fasten their seatbelts when driving a car. And from the 70s on, for example, in all crime series, in all television plays and so on, it was very important that an actor who gets into a car buckles their seatbelt. Role model. Exactly. And that would be a positive manipulation, for example, because manipulation is value-free, first of all, which then led to a general cultural impression that it is better to buckle up. But of course, this also works the other way around. And this could now be viewed negatively, for example, on smoking. For example, for a while, smoking was portrayed as being masculine. Then we had a general picture, who smokes is cool. That's what I want to express. And these are actually unconscious levels, because when I see this over and over again, it's like a little kid being born into a family. This child is being manipulated by the behavior of the parents. And then I'm 40 or 50 years old and my wife tells me, you're becoming just like your father. Then I know exactly that I am living patterns that I copied as a baby, as a small child. And these patterns are powerful. They are very, very deeply rooted. And such patterns, one also speaks of dissolving patterns, which usually takes place with outside help. And then you definitely need an inner willingness to tackle it. How can I judge who I can trust to let someone get close to me, to go into therapy like this? So, as a first step, I would actually recommend saying, I'll take a look at which patterns I would like to change at all. Because people tend to, unfortunately, this is another concept that we can ascribe to our brain. The human being, as such, mostly then goes into a change or in a desire for change when it's almost too late. On the other hand, there is rarely a desire for change in areas that work well. I'll give another example now. Everything in life is a pattern. Language are frequencies, lights frequencies, all patterns. How we behave are patterns. We repeat over and over again. If I now had a pattern, for example, that ensures that I am successful in my job, then I would look at the pattern, that would be my approach in the recommendation, and would see how I strengthen this pattern, because if I'm successful in an area, it conforms to a deeply ingrained pattern within me. So my character, if I build up this pattern, strengthen it, then patterns that I find disturbing will be less pronounced. I'll give you a very simple example. Someone is founding a company as a one-man show or a one-woman show, and is, for example, very creative and advises customers. And it's great. Then, on the other hand, they might have a weakness with their bookkeeping because they're so creative, so they're also doing creative accounting, and it's going to end in chaos. And that person, if they would focus on their strengths, becoming as quickly as possible, as successfully as possible, with a creative advice, then they can hire someone for a small fee who does the bookkeeping. And a person who loves accounting will never do creative client consulting, but they will do bookkeeping, Excel spreadsheets, talking to the accountant, everything creative people hate. And like this, very interesting models arise at the moment. When I deal with myself and I reflect on myself, then I might not need any coaching at all because I'm apparently too lazy for bookkeeping, but I just have to ask myself, is this really my fulfilling task? And if it's not, I just leave it. Exactly, you say fulfilling task. There is also this concept of life's task or soul's task when you enter life, and also got the tools for that. It's about discovering that. Some people have it dropped in their laps, they have it under control. Others find it difficult and may only discover their true calling after 50 years. So, you say, use it or lose it. And I want to ask you right now, if I haven't lived my true calling for 50 years now, is it then withered, or Can I, now from a neuroscientific point of view, wake it up again or reactivate it? Well, that's the beauty of talking about these subconscious levels. They have incredible power. That means they will never wither because it's my character. I would have to access it, so we do that, for example, by analysing the voice. Anyone can recognise their character in an hour in a way that is phenomenally easy, and they can then immediately make a conscious decision. Do I want to pay more attention to this character image? Okay, I see. That means use it or lose it may be superficial. It takes a little more time to get back to it, but it's not really lost. Yeah, because we are here for this task, and it's unconsciously manifest. We can lose it too. If you die and never looked at it, that's for sure. But it's so dominant. This use it or lose it is, of course, true for my brain activity, my muscles and so on. I totally agree. But the purpose of life is really just a question of when do I recognize it? And that's by looking at my unconscious levels, my character. Yeah, other levels may have to be cleared away or uncovered first, put away. You said it so nicely in your example earlier. It's not about the negative patterns or tackling, resolving the negative in the unconscious, but I can also reach this goal if I start positively. So the positive is what I would like to pass on to our viewers. Let's encourage our positive aspects. Let's listen to ourselves and strengthen our positive sides, and then the negative ones fade away. Can you say it like that? Actually, yeah. You just said a nice sentence there. Let's listen to ourselves. That's exactly what I would recommend. To perceive the voice, so how do I express myself? Then I strengthen the strengths. And by strengthening the strengths, the weaknesses become weaker. And people, and maybe as a really last little conclusion to the topic, people always come under pressure when weaknesses come to the surface. When the strengths are on the surface, the weaknesses go down, and all the stress in the system regulates itself and relaxes. That's the feeling of stress again, or the gut feeling. If I feel happy doing something, then I know I'm on the way. That was intended for me, or that I once intended for myself. Exactly. Nice. Where can we get more information if we want to go deeper into this subject, or, for example, systematically want to approach the topic conscious, unconscious? Possibly on my website. I've got a few presentation excerpts on my website, but we also have a great site where we have a lot of video interviews, for example. It's called news.tv, which I would actually recommend most if you bring a bit of time. You can experience many interesting things there. You can also learn something about Wooyce, this recording of your own voice to recognise your own character. There's an app for that, so there are a lot of exciting options there. Great. Dear Josua, thank you for being here and sharing your information with us. With pleasure. See you next time. Dear viewers, I hope we were able to convey to you how strong your unconscious is. Give it a chance. Listen to yourself. Further information and contact details for our guests can be found on our website. Thank you for your interest and check back with us soon. I look forward to seeing you again.